This is my mother's best friend's story. I'm going to tell you like my mother told it to me. It was 1978, and Cheryl was really excited to be chosen to appear on the dating game after it was narrowed down to 5 other girls to be chosen. We screamed and hugged. She was so excited that she would be on TV and get a date. Well, that was when she had the closest call of her life. The contestant on the show came across as charming. His name was Rodney Alcala, and she picked him for the date. Cheryl never went on the date because shortly after, Ronnie started contacting my mother's friend over and over again, late at night, saying things like,
"Hey Cheryl, I can't wait for our date. Maybe you will let me photograph you naked afterwards."
She was getting really creeped out and would call me crying, saying that he kept calling and sometimes would just breathe without saying anything. She knew it was him, despite that caller ID wasn't a thing on phones yet. I told her to tell the show that he was bothering her because they had yet to go on their date to Magic Mountain, now known as Six Flags. We should have called the police, but back then, no one really did that kind of thing. She told the show that she did not want to go on this date and refused, saying that she did not want to be near him as he was really creepy, and also said that they could keep the date prizes and let him have them or give them to someone else. She changed her number and didn't hear anything from him again. A while later, we heard about the things that he had done. He was already a sex offender and convicted rapist prior to the show, but they never did a proper background check. Shortly after Cheryl refused to go on the date with him, he murdered 2 women, and there was rumors going around saying that her rejection of Alcala might have pushed him over the edge to kill these women. Only to find out he had actually already been on a murder spree, and there was probably around 10 more other victims before he was even on the show. Had Cheryl gone on the date with him, she very well may have ended up like these other women. She said that it haunts her that she picked him, and looking back on how creepy his answers were, and that on TV she kissed a serial killer. She said that she was glad she went with her gut and didn't go on that date. The justice system failed, and the psycho was able to get out and is suspected of killing around 50 people, some of them being young children, and would take pornographic photos of these people prior to raping and torturing them. This man, who almost murdered my mom's best friend, is known as the dating game killer. He has murdered people from California to New York. To this day, the story chills me to the bone, and I'm glad that my mother's friend trusted her gut and didn't go on that date. She had a really close call. So, I am 23 now, but when I was 18, I'm not proud to say that I was a bit of an idiot and often got myself into stupid situations, as I'm very friendly and confident. I'm from the UK, and drinking, clubbing, and buying your own cigarettes becomes legal when you turn 18, so I definitely enjoyed the freedom. Bear in mind that I'm a 5'1" female, petite, but with the Marilyn Monroe figure, which means I get a lot of unwanted attention from some rather inappropriate people. My friend Harry and I decided that we would go to the Bristol because they have some really good gay bars. And though I'm not gay myself, I have a lot of gay friends and enjoy the atmosphere and the people I meet at these venues. We arrived and met a few of our friends and headed into the city center. Arriving and having already had some pre-drinks, we were all a little tipsy. As the night goes on, we ran out of cigarettes, which when you're out and a smoker, it's the pinnacle of doom, especially as from that point on, everyone guards their cigarettes like they're the Holy Grail. I tell Harry that I'm going to get some from a nearby co-op, which honestly isn't that far. It's about a 5-minute walk maximum, but myself being full of Dutch courage is apparently invincible, so I persuade him that I'll be fine and totter off on my high heels. To get to the store, you have to walk down a rather dark small road, but there are a lot of people outside the bars, and I honestly had no problem getting there to find it open and still serving. After only a few seconds of being outside the co-op, a 50-year-old scruffy man approaches me. His face is pale and wrinkled. He says, "Hey there, having a good night?" "Yeah, thanks. Yourself?" "Yeah. Be safe though. I mean, I'm an off-duty police officer, so you have nothing to fear. But be careful, there are some real weirdos in this city." Now, what he was saying wasn't weird. I'm originally from Bristol, and there are a few generally weird people, but isn't that true of anywhere else? The point I started feeling edgy around this guy was after waiting in the queue for a couple of minutes. He keeps repeating the fact that he's an off-duty police officer at every opportunity he had. Like he was trying to lure me into a false sense of security, and it wasn't working. My weirdo radar was going off like a siren. And then I did something stupid. I said my goodbyes and headed down the dark road, back to my friends, hoping to create some distance, thinking that he was just a lonely old guy trying to chat up a young girl. This is where I went wrong. I walked down the road and felt this uneasy, chilling feeling shooting down my back. I kept walking but stole a glance behind me discreetly as to not alert whatever was creating this feeling. And that was when I saw him. A dark figure dove behind a large bin. I kept looking in horror, and after a moment of being frozen in place from the edge of the bin, a featureless head started to look around the corner. I freaked and noped the hell out of there. I should have kicked my heels in sheer panic, but I forgot I was even capable of doing such a thing. I heard footsteps pounding behind me as the off-duty police officer ganged on me. He grabbed my arm, yanking me in mid-sprint as he towered over me. I was terrified by this point, and the fight-or-flight section of my brain had fully activated. And though I'm small, I hit him harder than I ever whacked anyone in my life. As he stumbled back, obviously shocked, I ran as fast as I could to a bar entrance that was only a matter of seconds away from running to. I ran to a bouncer that I had chatted to earlier in the night, explaining what happened. She reared up, and the moment he came around the corner, she turned into my bloody superhero, telling him to fuck off, and if he came any closer, she would take him down herself. So I was back in the protected area, and though I was safe and with my friends again, this was still a lingering dread. The man stood on the curve of the road under a streetlight for the rest of the night, staring at me. The light intensified his deep-set wrinkles, and his eyes were wide and desperately searching until he found me in the crowd. When he did, a wide and circus-like smile would spread across his face, and he would slowly wave. So this happened when I was 12. I was alone in my room chatting with some friends at 2 a.m. It was a few days before the New Year's, so a lot of people were usually roaming the streets at night, going home from parties and such. My room had these curtains, which if my blinds weren't closed, you could see into my room. On this unfortunate night, I had forgotten to close my blinds, and I was sitting in my bed, so any creep could come peek through my window and see me. Just a little note here. At the time, I lived on the first floor of an apartment complex with my family in a quiet town in Finland. I was in the middle of a conversation with my best friend when I heard slight knocking on my window. I ignored it, thinking that it was just the cold winter air messing with the window. A few seconds later, I heard the same knock again, but louder. This is where I made a big mistake. I did not check what was happening at my window. 10 seconds later, someone started violently banging on my window. At this point, I became scared shitless. I immediately moved to the corner of my room because at that moment I realized I had not closed my blinds. The banging got louder and louder. At that moment, I should have rushed to my parents' room, but I was frozen in place. Soon enough, the man started yelling at my window. It was pretty much inaudible. He was clearly drunk. I could tell by his voice. Then he shouted so loud that I could hear something which roughly translates to,
"Open the fucking window."
At that moment, I almost started crying, until I heard my neighbor's dog barking. My neighbor always went on long walks at night with his dog, and thank God he came right at that moment. My neighbor started yelling at him furiously while his dog was still barking out of his mind. I heard them argue for a while until it eventually quieted down. I waited about 15 minutes until I checked the window. I have absolutely no idea what happened to the guy. He just completely disappeared, and my neighbor never brought it up. At this moment, you might be thinking that it was a dream, but I swear this was not a dream. I never told my parents. They still have no idea what happened that night, and they probably never will.